Michael, let's get right to it. You've been around covering this game a number of years. You saw a lot of things, you've heard a lot of things, and Monday was a special day in all three countries. And as I said at the beginning of the show, Michael, I was happy for Canada, but I'm frustrated, I'm confused, and everything in between. So let's get right at it, Michael. Let's go way back when we heard rumors that each of these nations were possibly thinking of bidding on their own. And I was happy, and I really believed Canada was going to do that. And I thought that they had everything in place to do it. But obviously, you know, the government and the funding and all this would be an issue with all three nations. But when it expanded, I kind of thought that something like this would come down. Maybe two nations together, but not three. I believe in my heart of hearts that if Canada did go up against the USA and Mexico, that Canada would win. Not because I'm a Canadian, because the USA had it, Michael, and tell me if I'm wrong, and because of the political turmoil in the USA right now in regards to all over the world, and Mexico financially isn't as stable as Canada, I would say, and everyone all over the world loves the Canadians, and we've hosted a Women's World Cup on and on. I believe we would have got it. Your thoughts on that before we talk about the bid?
It's quite possible you might have been able to get it. I don't know if there would be enough. I'm not an expert on how many stadiums are, world-class World Cup stadiums there are in Canada. I know that there are many. I don't know if there would be enough necessarily to fit FIFA's criteria. And as we all were reminded during the Women's World Cup, USA soccer fans had no problems coming over to Europe, to Canada for a few days or a week or two to watch the U.S. team or just women's soccer in general. Saying that, FIFA looks at the World Cup as its great money-making machine. And from what I've heard, reportedly, Russia 2018 is going to make between $5.5 and $6 billion. Yes,
Wow.
$1 billion for FIFA. I would think that they would see the next World Cup in a CONCACAF country as a humongous moneymaker, considering it would be boosted to 48 teams, more stadiums, more tickets sold, more licensing, merchandising, and whatnot. And I would not be surprised if there are projections for 8 to 10 billion, and maybe I'm wrong with that. So with FIFA saying that they wouldn't mind seeing a multiple country bid beyond 2, even 3 or even 4 countries, I think the U.S., Canada, and Mexico got together and said, you know something? This might work out this way. I understand about the political turmoil in this country, but one way to get around it is to have partners, bidding along with you.
But equal partners, Michael, equal partners. And that's where I think a lot of people are upset here in Canada. And in Mexico, if I'm a Mexican, I'm more furious. And I'll tell you why, Michael. It's not because Canada and Mexico got 10 games apiece. I would have been happy with 15. I'm okay with Canada because there's going to be a lot of benefits even with those 10 games that we're going to get here. Stadium upgrades, renovations, a new stadium possibly, on and on. But if I'm Mexico and even Canada and only 10 each, and from quarterfinals on, the USA is going to get all the cherries on top of the sundaes, and we're going to get all the prunes, and we're not going to get any semifinals or quarterfinals. I mean, Michael, you know CONCACAF better than I. You followed along. The world-famous Azteca Stadium will not get a quarterfinal game or a semifinal game. You got to be kidding me, Michael.
That, looking back at it, well, that would be the wise thing to do. But one thing you have to remember, this is just a bid. I understand that you're not happy with it, you're upset with it, and there are probably, like you said, a lot of Canadians who have similar emotions. But this is FIFA's tournament. Remember that. And FIFA, it's their football. And if they say, yes, we'll take the bid, but you've got to put a quarterfinal here and a quarterfinal there. Even though this is, to me, I look at it as a starting point. So it's not an end-all type of situation. I'm not saying not be disappointed or peeved or anything like that, but just remember FIFA has the final say on where games go. Or and I would, the way things are out there, nothing surprises me anymore. And I wouldn't be surprised if FIFA comes down with a ruling. Yes, you could have the World Cup, but we will decide where the games go in the round of 16, quarterfinals, et cetera, et cetera.
And I would love that, Michael. To be honest, I would love that. And look, with all due respect, I love my brothers and sisters down south. Love them, respect them, love the country of US of A. I just find that some, not all, the arrogance, the ignorance of some thinking up here in Canada that we have every surface and every facility that has turf on it, and that we have no grass up here. We don't know how to grow it, because still we get a couple of geniuses that want to throw in the turf that was in the Women's World Cup, and someone asked it again on Monday. And you mean to think up here in Canada, if we got this World Cup bid and we got a wonderful grouping, that we're not going to build a wonderful stadium with grass, or use BMO and add to that, or at Rogers Center put down on and on and on. I mean, that's what boggles the mind. Like, I'm all for, Michael, the US of A getting the final. All for it. They deserve it. Whether it's New York, LA, or Dallas, no problem. But Mexico and Canada have to get into the semifinals or quarterfinals, Michael, somehow, some way, or else it's not really a marriage, a bid together. It's really the USA, and we'll give you the leftover games that we don't want because we can't sell them, so you take them.
Well, first of all, with grass, as it was proved in 1994 and improved since then, you can have grass fields inside domes. You could roll out grass, good quality grass, over artificial turf. That should not be a problem. And quite frankly, and I know this is 2 years ago, I still think the Women's World Cup should have been on grass, and I think FIFA had the money and should have spent the money to put the entire tournament on grass. I know you've argued that many, many times over the last several years. But saying that, the production, putting grass over an artificial field should not be a problem at all. And to me, I didn't even think of asking a question like that, because I just assumed whatever fields had artificial turf, boom, put grass over them. It doesn't cost that much as opposed to what it was in '94. Like I said, it's a bid. I look at it as a starting point. Would not be surprised if FIFA also maybe takes a couple of more early round games and gives it to Canada and Mexico. Maybe you get 14 games. A couple in the in the knockout round, and maybe a couple more in the opening.
And Michael,
too.
You would know better. Yeah,
football. Just remember that it's FIFA's football, for better or worse.
Absolutely, you're bang on, and you know the game inside out much more than I do, especially when it comes to political games, backroom discussions, on and on. You know that. You've been around CONCACAF and the world's game much longer than I. But I think I'm pretty astute when it comes to certain things that are taking place behind the scenes, that if it smells bad, it stinks bad, it is bad. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. To me, I understand that money is king of kings, and that's what makes the world go round. We know that the USA has the wonderful money component that maybe Canada and Mexico don't have. But they're all going to have issues, whether it's Canada, USA, Mexico, to convince, again, the different cities, the different local governments to buy in if they have to build new stadiums, to buy in to build new hotels, on and on. Everyone's going to have that issue. Now, we know that logistically the United States is much more convenient than Canada or Mexico. But again, we live in an age where, the farthest flight from Toronto to Montreal isn't that far. Or from, let's say Mexico City to pick another destination.
Mm-hmm. First of all, with hotels, I've been to Canada countless times for mostly soccer events, and obviously 2015, and just some of the cities that come off the top of my mind. The obvious cities that are going to be that I would assume would be hosting games, and I even asked that question about how many cities would be considered, and they didn't even have a number, let alone names. But in Vancouver, in Canada, you'd have, I think, Vancouver, Montreal, and Toronto as a starting point. And, then you've got some other possibilities with, Ottawa, Calgary, Edmonton, and I hope I'm not forgetting anyone, or I'll get a nasty email. But I've been to, and I forgot about Winnipeg, excuse me. I've been to most of those cities, and I don't think hotels will be a problem. And I don't think you have to build a new stadium, quite frankly. You're going to have to restructure the stadiums, probably for security more than anything else, and take down the usual signage there, just because that's what FIFA demands. It's their tournament. But I just see this World Cup, regardless where it goes in North America, and I really think it's going to come here, quite frankly. I'd be surprised if it goes anywhere else. This is going to be the least expensive in terms of building stadiums. I mean, I like what there is north and south of the border and here in the United States. So I don't have a problem with any of the stadiums. BMO Field might be, quote-unquote, considered small, but you could always add more. And I know you have the Rogers Center down the road there, too, that can hold a few people. So
absolutely, Michael. I believe it's a slam dunk. I don't think that no one will beat this bid. It's a slam dunk. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, with these street powerhouses in this bid, no one's going to beat this bid at all. It's a slam dunk. Now, to me, here's the other thing that really sticks out to me and bothers me a bit here, Michael, is, again, this is a joint bid. The allocation of games, it is what it is. I'm thinking it might get up to 15 apiece for Canada and Mexico, and the USA has the rest of it. But the last point I want to make with you before I let you go is this, and get your thoughts. Everyone's talking about making jokes at Canada again. A lot of my brothers and sisters who I love down south, hey, Canada, hey, Anthony, you're finally going to get into the World Cup. You'll get your way, you'll backdoor your way into the World Cup because you're going to host it. You know what? At this point, Michael, I live and breathe Canadian soccer. I die for my country and the game that I love here. I don't want to get easy qualification in like that, especially with this marriage and this bid. I'd rather not. I'd rather try and qualify, to be honest with you, because if it means that we get automatic qualification with 10 games under our belt that we're getting, why? I'd rather go through the blood, sweat, and tears to try and get in. Your thoughts?
Well, first of all, boy, that sounds familiar, because I remember when the U.S. was awarded the World Cup on July 4th, 1988. I was in Zurich, Switzerland the day it happened. The U.S. hadn't been in a World Cup, or hadn't qualified for a World Cup since 1950, and that was 38 years and counting at the time. And people were saying, why are you putting it in that white spot in the world? And I don't want to go too deeply into the background, but, North American Soccer League just went under. There were many problems with soccer in this country, just trying to get professional soccer up and running again. And fortunately for U.S., they qualified on their own for the 1990 World Cup in 1989. Back in 1986, 84, 85, 86, people might not remember this, but I do. Canada had a much, much better national team than the U.S. You're talking about Lenarduzzi, Segota, Tino Lettieri, and I'm probably missing a few other key players too. But these players, talented players, seasoned veteran players, they played in the North American Soccer League. So at one time, Canada was ahead of the U.S., and they earned their way to the 86 World Cup. Maybe the results didn't turn out the way you wanted, but you got into the big dance. The way I look at it, and this is where I might differ from you, if you're the host team and that part of the rules are you get in, boom, take the invitation and say thank you very much. I remember before the 1994 World Cup, and the U.S. had a young team. You had, at the 1990 World Cup, Ted Ramos, Peter Vermes, Tony Meola. Most of them were college graduates. I think Tony Meola was still in college at the time. Bora Milutinovic took the team over, and he basically had them go on tours in Europe, in Central America, occasionally maybe to South America, playing friendlies at home. And whether it's Octavio Zambrano, the present coach, maybe he'll still be the coach then, or his successor, or someone else down the line. I just think they're going to whip that team into competitive shape. You might not necessarily have the situation to qualify for the World Cup, but I'd like to think that that team will be whipped into shape to be a competitive team in, almost a decade from now. The clock is ticking, 9 years to go.
And it'll be great to see you at that World Cup, Michael, whether in Canada or in the U.S. or Mexico. Sit down in the press box, have something to eat and drink again. It'll be a wonderful time once again to discuss the game we love so much. Michael, God bless you. Thank you so much for making time again. Happy Passover. Always appreciate you making the time. And boy, oh boy, Branko Segura, what a career he had in indoor soccer as well. Tony Meola stoned Italy back in that World Cup in '90 on a few chances. I'll never forget that. Good times, Michael. Good memories. Thanks again for making the time. Really appreciate it.
Hey, my pleasure as always. Thank you.